Hello and welcome to the gallery. My name is Jon, and this week we are painting the Kitbashed Knight. A few weeks ago, I kitbashed a Chaos Knight, a demon engine spawned straight from the warp. A video of that can be found here. Now, it has had quite a few views since I made the Knight, so it was high time that I would paint the damn thing. So let's just jump straight into it. It's not overly complex. I will be using an airbrush a little bit, but not overly too much, I hope. Okay, let's start this project. We're starting from the zenithal undercoat that I did in the previous video. We're not using that really. That was mainly just so I knew what I was looking at. We're gonna start by painting the entire model in Vallejo silver. Now I love this silver paint. It flows really well, both with an airbrush and with a brush. I'm using an airbrush from these first steps of this project, but that's mainly because it's the simplest way to get the paint down. Also, when we start hitting it with a little bit of contrast later on, it really helps to use the airbrush in that case. As you can see, I'm airbrushing here Sigvald Burgundy on the armor panels of the model. And if I would brush this over top this silver undercoat, it would really flow into the sides. The main thing about this silver undercoat is the paint really flows on it. It almost feels like you're using an oil wash when you're using these more liquidy paints, both shades and contrast paints and inks and everything like that. So an airbrush is quite necessary for me to get this look that I was going for, this shiny burgundy color. And I really liked that look. I wasn't certain if it would work on this model, but I really wanted to paint something big in this color. So I did. Now it's just basically airbrushing all those panels. There's not that many of them, but there are quite a few, especially on the back of the X-Fortifine that I have as the bottom part of the model. And once I get this all done, I start working on it a little bit more with a brush. The main thing here is to clean up everything where the purple went where I don't want it. I'm not too worried about the trim of the actual armor plates because I will be painting them in a different color later on. But all the metallic bits and even some of the skin bits and the bone bits that are part of this model, I'm painting in silver again with the same color. It flows well from the brush as well as from the airbrush, and I'm just getting a nice standard uniform color going that I will later paint on top of or do something else with. Maybe I should have done the skin in a different color at this point or not, but it was simplest just to take the silver, put it where I don't want purple, and then work from there. Now we have to work with the silver a little bit and against the silver because it's so smooth. Everything we'll do later on will flow. So we're gonna rough it up a little bit. I'm using typhus corrosion and I'm putting it here and there, getting a little bit of an older look to the model here and there. I'm both just stapling it down, just a dot here or there. I'm putting some water in it as well in some places. I'm feathering it a little bit. I'm using it undiluted. I'm using various different methods, like I said, with the typhus corrosion, and depending on how thick I want it, or smooth, well, considering smooth with a paint that is basically a glorified shade with grit in it. And as you can see on these pincers thing here, I'm starting to put a little bit of it on with quite thick, and then I'm moistening my brush and feathering it out so it looks a little bit more, well, unnaturally natural. And I'm going all over the model, stippling, feathering, wet blending it almost with water, just finding different ways to put it on to make it look a little bit rough and interesting. After that, I'm going in with Agrex Earthshade, even more texture going here on the actual metallic skeleton of the guy, and this flows quite well. A little bit of it will be caught in the typhus corrosion bits because they're a little bit rougher. A lot of it will go into the recesses, deepening them a little bit more because it's going to flow away from the silver paint that we have already put on, because of the fact that it is so smooth, that it is so sleek, especially the airbrushed bits and even the brushed on bits. So we're just going over most of the model with this paint paint. Now that we've gotten our grimy, gritty look going, let's go for a little bit of a rust effect. This is not a new model, or if it is a new machine, it's not well kept. The main thing is the machine, the spirit in it, and the demonic engine. They're not too worried about a little bit of rust. So Gryph-hound Orange with contrast medium, and I'm both stapling it, I'm diluting it, I'm putting it here and there, and I'm feathering it with a moist brush. Different methods to get different results, but keeping a similar tone to everything. On top of the carapace, where more liquid would maybe collect then on the bottom or on the side panels, I'm just going really heavy-handed and hamming it on, and that will give it a nice rouge color. This rust texture and interesting look going well with the brown wash and the corrosion that's already there, and it'll look a little bit more real and a little bit more worn, and that's what we want. We don't want it too shiny, then it's not believable to begin with, but it will be less believable. Next, we're just gonna grab a few highlights. We will be doing this again later on. This was maybe a pointless step, but I felt like doing it at this point just to show where I was standing. So some nacron compound and just a soft dry brush here and there, catching a little bit of the typhus corrosion and the higher ridges just to get some sort of smooth look to it that we will, of course, be ruining later on with even more washes and more stuff to make it look a little bit more grimy and gritty. A little bit just on the tops here, just to clarify, to give ourselves a quick highlight, a quick edge highlight at some points, and just melding it a little bit together, and maybe subduing a little bit of those major rust spots, and just giving it a little bit of a more natural look. That is the main idea. We don't want it to look too artificial, even though it is highly artificial. And here is where we enter a stage I would like to call utter madness. This is completely bananas. The amount of trim that this guy has is just psychotic. It's bewildering and it's painful. This took so many hours. It hurts my soul to narrate this. But the trim needed to be painted, so brass scorpion it was, and it's just the main thing is just going around, finding all the trim, putting brush to model, and not lose your sanity. That was the main idea here. But nobody wants to watch this forever. It takes a hell of a lot of time to do this, and we don't have all the hours in the world to watch this video. So instead of just sitting here yamming on about this entire thing, I think it's the best idea just to pause here and stop yamming and then just fast forward through the damn thing. And finally, we're done with the damned trim. And it looks okay. It took a bit of time, but it was well worth it. It really defines the piece to get another metallic color going. But now, again, I feel he's too shiny, because that trim is quite crisp. So let's darken everything down and muddy everything up and disregard all the dry brushing I did before, because I'm a silly man. We're using Cryptek Armor Shade, and I'm going over the entirety of the model. The silver bits, the gold bits, the purple bits, the every bit. It will make it a little bit more uniform and darken it down, grime it up a little bit, make it a lot more fun. And that is the idea. I want it looking fun, and as you can see, immediately looks a little bit more weathered, a little bit more interesting, the right side from the left side. There's a slight difference there. Well, there's a hell of a lot of difference. And it's okay if it goes in splotches. This is not a clean machine. It's dirty and gritty, and I love it. Now, after we've done all this griming off the machine, we need to let it dry a little bit. And then we're gonna dry brush again with nacron compound fairly softly over the metallic bits and also over the bronze bits, because we want those bronze bits also to have this a little bit of edge highlighting, a little bit of wear to them. And that's the idea, to have the little bit of wear. It must be old, it can't be new and shiny. That's why we did all the grime and all the shades and all the various steps that we've been doing so far. It's quite necessary to get it a little bit on the dirty side. You've seen these imperial shiny knights. They're not fun, they're shiny, they're goody two-shoes. We want something horrendous and gritty and scratched. Okay, we got all the main colors down on the knight. There are a few details that we'll be working on next. Before that, why don't you check in the description? There is my Patreon if you want to join that, and various other interesting things. Well, in my opinion at least. Also, you have that like and share and subscribe and bell and everything like that. I recommend checking it out. We will be doing more interesting stuff in the future, like a highly complex paint job that will probably span the next fair few months, as well as still working on the Horus Heresy Marines and Cursed City and various other bits in between. But back to the night, we are continuing on with a little bit of the details. Now that we've done all the bigger blocks of paint that we've done for the model, let's go work on a few details, get some interesting different colors going, a little bit of more interest to it. We're starting out with all the places that will have lights, so the eye lenses of all the various little guys here and there of the servo skulls, and of course these coils on the guns, as well as some coils that I decided were coils on the back of the machine. We're back with the silver paint that we used earlier, and we're just brushing it on because it is quite a nice paint, and the contrast paint flows well on it, like I said before, and that gives us an instant shiny highlight without any real effort. Of course, you could use the same contrast paint later on, glaze it around to give the glow effect. I didn't, because I didn't feel like it, because I lost my mind doing the gold bits, to be honest. So we're brushing a little bit of warp lightning into all these silver bits because we want a uniform color between these. We've got this striking purple, interesting gold, a lot of grimy silver, so some shiny green works kind of well with it. Just be careful we're not hitting anything too much with the green, because it will look weird on the gold or the silver or the purple. But of course you can wipe most of it away. If you go immediately in with a damp brush, you can fix up many things. Mainly here I'm focusing on getting just the lenses and not the grid around the lenses, because that's the part that actually is green. The grid will stay silver, hopefully. And of course the little servo skull in the chest gets a dollop of green as well. Now we're gonna make some muscle burn and some metallic burn here and there, both on guns, on exhaust pipes and everything. Starting out with Dragon of Nightshade, just brushing that all around, a little bit heavy-handed. And I'm also going in between the teeth of the gun. That's a weird sentence to say. Teeth of the gun. And that's just to get an extra feeling of thinner metal there, might be more colored. Also putting this Dragon of Nightshade on those vents on the back, because it's quite a big vent, and I'm guessing there might be a lot of heat going there, as well as those little turret vents on top, on the side of the model. Just having blooming a little bit makes it a little bit more interesting, makes it feel a little bit more mechanically alive. For some reason, and I don't know what, but I liked it anyway, I decided to have this blooming effect also on all the tentacles. Maybe they're super heated at the end, who knows? It would be perfectly logical for this guy to have superheated tentacles. After all of this has dried, getting a little bit of Nuln Oil and just a dollop here and there on the frontest bit, make it a little bit darker, make it a little bit more burnt on top of the turrets. On the end of the big turret on the back, just a little bit of extra blackness there, a little bit of extra heat. And also on the tentacles, because I decided they were warm at this point, and I liked the idea. They felt a little bit flat, to be honest, even though got a lot of shade on it and dry brushing and everything. And now we're going to do something that's not metallic, and it's about damn time we start doing something a little less shiny. Let's start with the actual bone bits. I don't know from which creature they got this giant skull to make a servo skull. Maybe it's from bone meal, who knows. But I'm starting out with a little bit of skeleton bone as a base color. Seems kind of fitting, to be honest. And I'm painting that over the entirety of the servo skull, both the giant monstrosity of a hat he has, also the slightly smaller one in his chest cavity, and also he's got two in the little nook crannies on the back of his carapace, whatever you want to call it. Painting this all in this lovely creamy bone white color, and it's almost just this one coat. I might have to touch up here and there a little bit, but not really. It's a thick, nice color, and I love using it now that I've gotten it. And also, once I finished painting all these skulls, I decided to have it a little bit on the uniform side, so I started using the same color on all the skin, well, the stretched, flayed, necrotic skin that is on his legs and his front paw, claw legs. Just brushing that as well on top of that, getting some sort of nice color to it. It's a little bit on the streaky side, but you know what, I felt okay if it was a little bit on the streaky side. It felt a little bit fitting. Over all the bone bits, I'm putting skeleton horde. You see a theme. I like to use skeleton colors on skeleton bits. They work well together. It darkens it down quite a bit, but that's okay. We will be coming back with a little bit of highlights later on, but it works well together, these two. They're both on the brown, creamy, latte colors, and they make a really interesting dirty bone look. However, for the skin bits, I didn't want to have them looking the same as the bone bits, so just a little bit of Reichland flesh shade. I'm not thinning it out or anything like that. I'm watching that it doesn't pool overly much, but just brushing that on. And because we have this cream bone color underneath, it looks quite sickly and unnerving, this slightly tanned, overly stretched skin. Another good thing about the Reichland flesh shade, if it goes a little bit into the metallics, doesn't matter that much. We got a lot of tones going there, so it's somewhat okay. Now we're going to highlight again this giant servo skull and the smaller ones as well. I'm using the same color I started with, bone white, skeleton bone, I'm sorry, but I'm thinning it out a little bit. I'm doing first a small layer, and then I'm doing spot highlighting here and there, so we get this tonal variant of the bone. It's not as flat as it might be, because this is a giant focal point of the model, this bone face inside all this metal contraption. Now that this monstrosity has gotten its dollop of paint, let's spend a few minutes just working on the base, because this weird monster needs a normal-looking base. All that is left is the base, and we're going for a quite different looking base from the model. This would feel at home with regular medieval characters or with the Age of Sigmar characters. I'm going for a natural look. It will look even more weird to have this metal contraption walking on this base. I'm using the zenithal that we started out with, but I'm dry brushing a little bit of matte white on top of it just to get a little bit more edges on it, a little bit more zenithal-y, almost slop chop, whatever it's called, paint method, so we get some extra crispiness to some of the edges. I'm using quite a heavy-handed dry brushing method because I want quite a lot of contrast going on. I'm starting out with Agros Dunes, and this will be done mostly with shades and a little bit of dry brushing. We're not really focusing overly too much on it. We want a natural look, and natural is quite on the dirtier look. So 2 different brushes I'm mostly using, a somewhat big brush and then a huge brush, mainly because why wouldn't I? I'm not going for any finessey details here. Now for the Agros Dunes, it's the ground bit, and I'm also streaking it up into the rock, so it'll all blend a little bit more together and look a little bit more natural later down the line. As you can see, it's quite thick where I'm putting it somewhere, but then I'm feathering it out, not adding any water, just dragging from the pool that I made here and there. And immediately this looks kind of interesting. Now for the actual rock texture, I'm using Griff Charger Grey. It's got this blue tint to it, so it's quite offsetting against the ground tone that we already had. But I'm putting down pools and then dragging them out. That's the idea I'm going for here. And then I'm mixing it into the brown a little bit that I already put down. And it looks quite natural and quite, well, old and, like a rock rising from the ground with moss on it and weathering on it. And I love painting bases. That's just the thing. Painting these natural formations, you don't have to spend any time or any focus on it. You just sit down and you slop on paint where you feel like it's gonna go. And in the end, it'll always look interesting and nice, in my opinion at least. Acrylic Earthshade, I'm not putting it everywhere, but I'm putting it in many places. I'm putting down a dollop here and there, and then stipling it along, dragging it along, making it look more natural, blending everything together. And you can see that it's already starting to look kind of on the muddy side, but you still have these tonal variants from brown to darker brown to blue to green to white and to rock face. Now, for the ground, I wanted it to look a little bit more natural. It was a little bit on the muddy side, like I said. So I got some Beal Tan Green, and I started stapling that into the brown to get this old moss, this wet marshland look to it. And I liked that look. I felt it was kind of fitting for the creature, but offsetting, because it's quite different. It's the opposite of this shiny purpley thing to have this moss and gritty and grimy stuff. So on the rock face as well, a few dollops here and there just to get that moss feeling. Next we're into dry brushing again, because this is a simple method. We're dry brushing a little bit of rust grey on all the rock faces. It's not as heavy-handed as the matte white to begin with, but quite on the rough side. We want to catch those edges. And once all these rust grey edges have been caught, I'm going in a little bit Fenrisian grey, and it's a lot smoother of a dry brush. We're really just catching the top edges, just a little bit here and there, as you can see. Smooth brushing, more on the top, always down. The light is hitting from the top, therefore lighter bits are facing up. It goes to show. And as you can see, the rock is looking a little bit more rocky, and the ground is looking a little bit more ground-ish. However, we've gotten the rock looking quite like we would like it to like. That's a lot of likes, but that's what we're going for. Now we're going to work on the ground as well, and it's the same method. A little bit of a lighter color, and then an even lighter color after that. Ochre and Camo is the first dry brush we're putting on the ground, and that'll make it a little bit more greener, a little bit more marshier, because it is quite a warm green color. It's got a lot of yellow in it. And then a smooth dry brush of Flayed One Flesh on top of that, and it'll look quite on the mossy marshland side. And this Flayed One Flesh is going a little bit into the rock face as well to merge the two even more. Now that the base is basically done, let's throw some tufts on it, make it look a little bit more natural, a little bit more, well, it's not more alive because these are Deadland tufts and they are quite fitting with this base. Everything's ready, just plopping the guy on the base, and we're good to go for the reveals. And here we have this weird looking knight. It's quite an abominant, so it's fitting with the theme I was going for. It's slightly eerie. It's not like the knights we're used to by any means, but I like it. It's definitely different kind of look to all the other knights in my army, and therefore it stands out. And I want my knights to stand out because they are big, hulking brutes, and they need to have some sort of presence on the battlefield. It's a little bit on the Emperor's Children Noise Marine side looking, with the purple or the burgundy and the gold trimmings and everything, but I think that's okay. Who knows, maybe Fabius Bile had some input into the design of this monstrosity. If not, he should have. My god, it's horrendous. I love it. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me here today. There are links in the description for all kinds of stuff, social media and various tidbits. You do with it what you will. Like, share and subscribe, and let the colors flow. But until next time, farewell.